Hello, and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today's podcast number 1716. The topic is nutrition, and the title is The Carnivore Diet Podcast, Comment Response. So I did a podcast on the carnivore diet in podcast 1708. And in that podcast, I kind of talk a little bit about what the carnivore diet is and my thoughts towards it. In general, it's an all-meat diet. You're not supposed to eat fruits and vegetables and grains. You're just supposed to eat meats. Sometimes people will throw in things like, cheeses, eggs, something that comes from an animal. But the kind of general premise is you're supposed to eat meat. And you can listen to podcast 1708 for more of my original opinions and thoughts. And then what I wanted to do in today's podcast was we had a viewer on our YouTube channel, and our podcasts are shared on our YouTube channel. Now it's just audio. There's no visual component to it. So they're viewing it on YouTube, but they're really just listening. So I might accidentally call them a listener. But the person who interacted on YouTube, they left a comment, and I thought it would be kind of fun just to kind of talk through the comment. And part of the reason why is they bring up points that seem kind of counter to things that I had said, and I thought it might just be good to get clarity. And they bring up points that are actually really good, that I think are great to reinforce. So I kind of want to support that as well. So I want to clear up some of the things and then support some of the things. And instead of just making a YouTube comment where likely they're going to be the only ones to see it, I thought maybe making a podcast would be helpful so we all could kind of hear the information. So what I thought I'd do is I would read through their comment, and then I'll go ahead and kind of give responses to like each section of the comment. So they commented, "You will not be low in vitamins, minerals, and everything else," which is something I had said in podcast 1708. So if you haven't listened to that, you probably want to listen to that and then come back to this one. But I did say that there are things that are missing in an all-meat diet, and this is part of the response is that no. So they're saying you will not be low in vitamins, minerals, and everything else. Meat is highly nutritionally dense and is very bioavailable. It takes more work to get nutrients from plants. They are not very bioavailable. Plants take resources from your body to digest and unlock those minerals. Meat is efficient and provides all nutrients you need. And then they continue, it's very healthy to get rid of plants. Oxalates and other harmful plant chemicals and anti-nutrients will be gone. So we're going to touch on that as well. They continue, cholesterol is a non-issue. So I did talk about when you eat all-meat diet, you're going to ingest a lot of saturated fats, and that can lead to increases in cholesterol. And meat products contain cholesterol, so that's probably not going to help either. So cholesterol could be an issue, and I thought it might be good. If somebody does that diet, if you do it for like 3-6 months, probably might be a good idea to get some blood work done so that way you can just see if your cholesterol did go up. So they responded as part of their responses, cholesterol is a non-issue. That is all based on Ansel Keys, and his study is proven fraudulent and was influenced by sugar and corn oil companies. So we'll touch on that. Carnivore is wonderful, and I've never felt better. I dropped the Mediterranean diet for this, and I'm never going back. Your textbook regurgitating manipulated knowledge of the 60s, so they're not happy with my knowledge base. And then they finish with, try the carnivore diet, people. It is amazing. I've never felt better, slept better, or have ever been as clear-headed as I am now on the carnivore diet. Heck, don't listen to anyone's advice regarding good and bad. Do your own study and try it for 60 days. It'll change your world. And that's actually, I really do like that part of it, is encouraging people to try things, on their own. Like, you can definitely research, study, listen to a podcast like you are now to find out more. But at the end of the day, it does help, if it's something that's interesting to you and it seems like it'll have positive aspects, could be helpful to give it a try. And that's something I mentioned in podcast 1708 is, you can try it, start with a diet, structure and then modify as you may need in order to make sure it, fills in the gaps and or is personalized to what you need. So I agree with that as well. So I thought we'd go through and kind of, touch on parts of their comments, and I like it because it improves my knowledge. So a little bit of selfishness in wanting to respond because it helps me just kind of reinforce what I know and can continue to look up new information. So I really like this kind of aspect. And I thought it would just be fun to share with everybody else. I didn't want people to read their comment and not have some kind of like response to that would help them kind of make sense of what was said in the comment. So again, real quick, is that the carnivore diet is a meat-only diet. Now, there are some variations where people will add some things, but that kind of, I don't want to touch on what might be a variant that somebody might use. I want to touch on the basics of it. So meat-only. So to their comment that you will not be low in vitamins, minerals, and everything else, meat is efficient and provides all nutrients you need. It provides a lot, but it does miss some things. One of the main things it misses is fiber. And you can supplement with all this. So I'm not saying you can't take a supplement or a greens supplement, and kind of fill in the gaps. I would recommend that you do that, of course. One of my most recommended supplements is a micronutrient type supplement that I tell clients to get all the time, whether they're eating plant only, meat only, or a blend of the two, more of an omnivore diet. It's definitely something I would think would be a good idea because we tend not to eat a high variety of foods even when we allow ourselves to eat all the foods. So it's probably a good idea. But a diet with that's meat only is like there's not going to be any fiber in there. Now, the research of whether fiber is necessary or not, there's always going to be, in everything I'm about to say, kind of pros and cons of different research. That's why, like when I got my master's in nutrition, we had to read a lot of research before we would say, okay, out of the multiple studies I read, maybe I read 10 studies and I say there's 8 out of 10 that say this, so that's probably true. That's most likely to be true. So you have to consume quite a few research articles to kind of cover the gaps that might be missing in the way in which one of the research articles did their kind of science. If they had a small population, but they had really good detail, you might then pair that with a study that had a really large population, maybe not as much detail, and you kind of blend it all together. But fiber has been shown to be connected with all-cause mortality, meaning the more fiber you eat, the less likely you are to die. And it's been a pretty strong study, and there's been a lot of studies. And fiber has been correlated with, not necessarily a direct causation, but correlated with reduced risk of cancer and reduced cardiovascular disease. Now, some of the counter arguments that people will say against that is that typically fiber-based studies are comparing really good quality high fiber diets to the quote unquote American standard, which is a lot of junk food. So people will say is, you can't say having more fiber is better than an all meat diet. And okay, I understand their point that if the two weren't compared directly, is going no fiber, all meat, is that an improvement from the typical American diet? Maybe. So it's not like, it's kind of one of those things where you just have to say, if I'm looking at the mass studies, overall, fiber has been shown to be helpful for overall health when we look at longevity of health. So that's something that is missing from meat, and you may want to kind of supplement that on top of the diet. And it's going to be one of those things where, unfortunately, if you say, how do I know I need to do it? There's pros and cons of that. Is you're not going to be, it's not like if I miss sleep, I'm very tired the very next day, where it's that fast of a reaction. Is if I'm missing fiber for a while, you may run into like colon cancer for all the meat, and maybe things aren't processing and moving as quickly as they need to. They're not fully eliminating. So it's something where you're not going to know right away. It's just we know that given a large enough population with a low enough fiber content, that eventually problems happen. So it's something you might want to consider adding to your diet, just to make sure you're going to the bathroom on a regular frequency and you're getting like a nice full elimination of what you're going to the bathroom with, what you're trying to get out. And that's something that is a consideration, is fiber. Another thing on an all-meat diet is you're not going to get a lot of vitamin C. Vitamin C is an antioxidant, so it helps to kind of protect cells from damage, and it plays a large role in maintaining healthy skin, healthy blood vessels, bones and cartilage, and some other odds and ends. But if you do an all-meat diet, you're not going to get a lot of vitamin C, so you might want to add that in as well. If you do an all-meat diet, you're not going to get a lot of folate. Now, folate helps kind of tissues grow and helps cells work. Folate works with vitamin B12 and vitamin C to help the body kind of break down, use, and create new proteins. It helps form red blood cells. It helps produce DNA. It does quite a few things. So folate is a pretty important thing. And that's something that's going to be missing in an all-meat diet. So meat, it has a lot of what you need, but there are a few little things that are missing. So you might want to consider supplementing to that to make sure that you're not too low in those. Now you can also get micronutrient tests done maybe once a year if you want, and that can be done through blood work. And there are sites you can order that online, but you can get a micronutrient test done through blood work once a year just to see where you're at and see if you actually are low in vitamin C and folate and those components, and then that would help you know if you need to supplement that or not. So the next comment they said is, meat is highly nutritionally dense and very bioavailable. It takes more work to get nutrients from plants. They are not very bioavailable. Plants take resources from your body to digest and unlock those minerals. It's true that meats are generally considered very bioavailable in that they're easier to digest than plant-based foods. And typically why that is because plant-based foods have fiber, which is non-digestible material, kind of the shells or the casings of the plants and vegetables. It helps them survive against bugs and insects and whatnot, and it makes our body have to work a little extra to break that down to get to the nutrients that are inside. How do we adjust for that? We can just simply chop them up, kind of mechanically break down the shells and the coatings on things, and then also cooking. Cooking vegetables helps to break down the fiber as well. So it is true that plants are not as easily digested as meats. Definitely true. Good. Now, next statement is it's very healthy to get rid of plants. Oxalates and other harmful plant chemicals and anti-nutrients will be gone. There are components or things considered classified under the term anti-nutrient that are found in vegetables. I don't know how to pronounce exactly all of these 100%, but glucosinolates, good Lord, thought I'd do better than that. Glucosinolates, there we go, glucosinolates are in vegetables like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, kale, things like that. And they can be correlated with the reduction of absorption of iodine. And that can impair thyroid function, for example. And that is something that we know is true. And I'm going to go through a list here, and then I'm going to come back and kind of make sense of this. Lectins are in legumes like beans, I think soybeans, peanuts, and whole grains. And they can interfere with the absorption of calcium, iron, phosphorus, and zinc. Oxalates, as they mentioned, are found in leafy green vegetables and a couple other things as well. And they bind actually to calcium, and they can actually prevent it from being absorbed. Phytates They are found in whole grains, seeds, legumes, and I think some nuts, and they decrease absorption of iron, zinc, magnesium, and calcium. Saponins are in legumes and whole grains, and they can interfere with normal nutrient absorption. And tannins, which are found in tea, coffee, you might have heard of that. It's found in tea and coffee, and they can decrease iron absorption. So there are things considered what's called anti-nutrients in vegetables, components that, when present, can decrease the absorption and usefulness of certain micronutrients. But they're not like entirely bad. So, for example, phytates, which we said were found in whole grain seeds, legumes, and I think some nuts, they've been found to help lower cholesterol, slow digestion, which we know because the fiber content of those foods, and it can help actually reduce spikes in blood sugar. So if you're having a meal and you have foods that contain phytates, that can actually help reduce the sugar spike that you have in that meal. Tannins have been shown to help decrease blood pressure. So there are a lot of quote unquote anti-nutrients, like that category, that have antioxidant and kind of like anti-cancer properties and actions. And what they found is that diets that are high in vegetables, they don't automatically correlate to low values in all like these components of micronutrients. So like calcium and phosphorus and zinc, they have found, if somebody has all plant-based diet, they have low protein variability. They are going to run into like having low like iron and zinc and magnesium and things like that. But it's more so related to, those are mostly found when somebody's doing like almost an all-plant diet. If somebody does a blend, like an omnivore, they blend meats and vegetables, they have not found that causes or like is correlated with a low absorption of all those micronutrients to the point where they're low in those micronutrients in their blood work. So typically, if somebody has a good blend of protein sources coming in and they have a good blend of the vegetables, they're going to have everything that they would need in regards to micronutrient absorption. But they're also going to have those benefits that like the lower cholesterol, the reduction or better blood sugar control, the reduction of blood pressure. So there are beneficial aspects to these quote-unquote anti-nutrient foods, containing foods. So it's true that plants and vegetables do contain anti-nutrients, but it's not true that is 100% something we need to avoid. Like processed meats and cheeses even have tannins. So there are certain elements that somebody might get, from like animal-based foods that they think are going to be completely anti-nutrient free, but that isn't 100% the case. I know that's a very small, kind of selection of processed meats and cheeses, but it just shows that there is some, a little crossover, and it's important to know that some of those anti-nutrients actually do have positive benefits as well, and that with a good blend of animal and plant foods, we tend not to see that the anti-nutrients present in vegetables have micronutrient absorption problems to the point where they're significant in blood work. So that's good to know. Now, the next comment they made is that the carnivore diet is wonderful and I've never felt better. I dropped the Mediterranean diet for this and I'm never going back. And then they go through and say, try the carnivore diet, people. It's amazing. I never felt better, slept better, or have ever been as clear-headed as I am now, or the carnivore diet. Super awesome. I'm very happy that they're feeling that way. It truly is good. Like, I'm very happy for them. And one of the things I just kind of want to add to that is, why might a person feel better if they do an all-meat diet or a carnivore-based diet? One component can be is increase in dopamine. If you increase your protein intake, and especially if you increase it significantly, you're going to be bringing in more amino acids. And amino acids are they play a role in dopamine production. Dopamine is our feel-good chemical. Like when we have high amounts of dopamine, we feel great. So if I'm ingesting more protein, bringing in more amino acids, I'm able to produce more dopamine, I'm going to feel great. So that can be one reason why, is if they've significantly increased their protein intake, they may have significantly increased their dopamine production. So plant proteins do provide amino acids which can go contribute towards dopamine production, but with plant proteins you tend to need a variety of plant proteins in order to cover and get all of the amino acids. So you would have to have a little more purposefulness to your protein selection if you're doing like an all plant-based diet. But again, if you're doing a diet that's blended with protein and animal proteins and regular fruits and vegetables for energy sources and stuff, you're probably getting a totally fine dopamine production. But if you're low in protein or you're not really paying attention to protein, then all of a sudden you switch to a really high protein diet, such as a carnivore diet, you're going to really significantly increase amino acids. You're going to significantly increase dopamine production. So that could be part of why they feel better. Another reason why a person might feel better on a carnivore diet is it's essentially an elimination diet. So they've eliminated specific foods by eliminating entire categories. So, for example, raw vegetables can cause digestive issues, and that can be due to the fiber. That's why some clients I've worked with in the past, they have to only eat cooked vegetables. If they eat raw vegetables, sometimes they've actually gotten redness on their skin, and they get like an itchy feeling. But whenever they eat cooked vegetables, they're totally fine. So that's kind of neat to know. It's neat that you can, instead of eliminating entire groups, you would just say, okay, if I want to have vegetables, I just have to make sure they're cooked. You might run into problems of certain classifications of fruits and vegetables, like nightshades, for example. I've had clients where that'll cause them digestive issues, but as long as they eat all fruits and vegetables other than in that classification, they're totally fine. Another thing is removing gluten, from grains. If you are gluten sensitive, you might not have has strong enough reaction to it to be gluten intolerant, have celiac disease. But you might be gluten sensitive, so entirely eliminating all grains can definitely make that feel better. But commonly, it's a greater likelihood that the elimination of a specific food, because they eliminated an entire food group, was a benefit, not that they needed to eliminate the entire food group. So it's not uncommon for people to have specific food allergies, even in certain classifications of foods. But it's very rare for someone to have a food allergy to an entire food group. Now, not like that's not possible, but for example, it's somebody can do gluten sensitivity. They might have to do gluten-free foods. So they get brown rice pasta, and now they can still have pasta. Yeah, so there's gluten-free bagels, gluten-free pastas, gluten-free a bunch of stuff. So that way they can still have what would feel like those elements of foods. They can still have vegetables, so to say. They're just going to have them in a different way. That is more common. An elimination diet is something that people commonly use all the time. I've done it, with clients as well. And you just basically want to reduce down to the bare bone basics of foods, let the person, their issues, they might be having digestive issues, let all that subside and calm down, and then you would slowly reintroduce items back in one by one to better identify what might be a food item that is causing them a problem. So switching to a carnivore diet would have been, in a sense, like the first step of an elimination diet, which is a very common process. Therefore, they're going to feel better because they've definitely eliminated something that may have been causing an issue for them, or even several things that were causing subtle issues. So that is Two reasons why switching over to a carnivore diet might make somebody feel better is the increase in dopamine and the fact that they're eliminating something that was an irritant. It doesn't necessarily mean that they need to stay at a carnivore diet. So it might have been a good change to make, and then they can slowly introduce, like for example, some people I know, they've reintroduced fruit, and they've found that fruits are totally fine. That gives them more variety to their food, gives them something that they can eat before a workout, just to have a little bit of energy, gives them just more options, and they found that's okay. So you would start with a carnivore diet as the first step of an elimination diet, and then you could slowly reintroduce foods to see if that's okay. If you still feel good, still sleeping well, still feeling clear-headed. So that's helpful. The next comment to touch on is cholesterol. So they say cholesterol is a non-issue. That's all based on Ansel Keys, and his study is proven fraudulent and was influenced by sugar and corn oil companies. So cholesterol is a good thing. Like, it helps us a lot. It's definitely good to have cholesterol. That's why our body makes cholesterol. It's involved in cell membranes. It's involved in hormone production for like testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, cortisol. It helps with digestion, helps make our bile. That helps to break down the food. So cholesterol is a good thing. You wouldn't want to completely eliminate all cholesterol in your body. But with most things in life, there's a too high and a too low. So cholesterol containing foods. So if you eat a food that has cholesterol in it, it is true that that's not going to have as significant of an impact on your blood cholesterol levels as people might think. There's been a lot of studies and a lot of things. In like one study I read, and this was a while ago, but I've heard it referenced in a couple videos, is that the cholesterol you eat from food, it doesn't go into our circulation in a very large percentage. They would estimate somewhere between maybe 10 to 15% of cholesterol from our diet actually contributes to our blood levels of cholesterol. So it's not like, if I eat 200, units of cholesterol from food, I'm going to get exactly 200 units of increase in my blood work. That's not how that works. But when you eat foods that are high in saturated fats are a different type of molecule than cholesterol, and they can actually get into the processing system in our body that makes cholesterol, and it can actually cause increase in LDL cholesterol. There's tons of research that supports that increase of saturated fat can directly cause increase in LDL cholesterol. Now, I've seen this firsthand with clients. I've had clients where we have reduced saturated fat and cholesterol containing foods and then retested their blood a month later, and there's a definite reduction. One of my clients, for example, they had too high cholesterol to get into the Army. So I had them get rid of whole eggs and just switch to egg whites. And then they retested their blood in a month, and boom, cholesterol was fine. They got in. So it's something that I have seen a direct impact, is when you reduce foods that contain cholesterol and saturated fats, a person's blood value does start to go down. Now, we just said that the greater percentage of that is probably coming from the reduction of saturated fat. But when we look at an all-meat diet, that is going to be a concern. If you're over-consuming saturated fats compared to how much you can, utilize them, you're going to have excessive saturated fat, and then that's going to contribute towards an increase in LDL cholesterol. So the cholesterol content of a food isn't as much of an issue as the saturated fat content of that food. And that can lead to an increase in cholesterol. So it is something you do want to consider, is that you still, if you're doing an all-meat diet, you still need to be mindful of your saturated fat intake. So that way it doesn't lead to any kind of cholesterol issues. Then the last comment we look at is they said, heck, don't listen to anyone's advice regarding good and bad. Do your own study and try it for 60 days. It'll change your world. True. Yeah, like I said, I like that advice, because if you listen to like the research and then you listen to anecdotal evidence, meaning if a lot of people on the carnivore diet, there might not be as much research to support their diet claims as there would be with an omnivore diet or a plant-based diet. But it doesn't mean that their anecdotal claims aren't valid. Like, they do feel better. Like what they're saying is true in how they're feeling. And some of the benefits that they're purporting is you can't deny it. They're saying it, they're feeling it, they're living it. So there is an aspect of sometimes science follows anecdotal evidence. It's almost like we have to do it and say, hey, this is kind of curious, let me look into it. So people doing like a carnivore diet, they're kind of in the doing it phase, and then hopefully science will catch up and do more and more studies, to kind of give them backing and to help understand what is happening and why it's happening. But it is true that many people do benefit from a carnivore diet. One of the authors I like is Jordan Peterson. He has 2 books, The 12 Rules for Life and then Beyond Order. I love both those books. I've listened to them both. I enjoy them both. Really good insight. Him and his daughter follow a version of a carnivore diet, and they've said that it has helped them with just a ridiculous list of problems that they were having. So that's great. It's awesome. I do encourage people, like I did say in podcast 1708, is, if this interests you, do it. It's a place to start. Just get started. And then you might find, okay, I started with the carnivore diet. I'm going to take a micronutrient supplement, something that has some vitamin C and folate in it. Maybe I add a little bit of fiber. I might find, hey, you know what? I have a sweet tooth. I want to have something sweet, so maybe I add certain fruits in, and all of a sudden that's feeling fine. You're still feeling okay. So you modify it as you go to make sure it's kind of what works best for you. And that is what I'd recommend. In general, I would, if I had to do a general population suggestion, which is exactly what these podcasts are, I wouldn't recommend that somebody starts with a carnivore diet, because for most people, it's not going to be check all the boxes of what they need. Does it work for some people? Hell yes, absolutely. I have worked with a lot of clients over the years, and I have never really said to anyone that they must follow XYZ for a diet. The idea is just to start with something that, if I have to give a general population recommendation, that's why on our website we have a free document for how to create your own nutrition program, and it talks through the steps of things that you have to get calories right, protein content right, meal timing right, and then the actual food choices matter. And when it comes to food choices, there's a lot of preferences that aren't going to impact it. You can do low fat, low carb, high carb, and that you can still control body weight. And then it's a matter of digestibility being important, and I've talked about that in the past podcast. So the food selection component is an aspect of a diet, for sure, that is important, but there's so many more elements to it. So there's a lot of personalization when it comes to the foods that you choose to eat. If you find that a carnivore style diet works for you and you're enjoying it, awesome. You might find, okay, as I'm doing it for a month or two, all of a sudden my energy is kind of crappy and I'm just really not hungry anymore for all this damn meat. And you might have to make a little bit of changes, in order to continue to be consistent but not miserable, So I encourage anybody, if you're interested in the carnivore diet, go ahead and start it and see how you feel. And then along the way, make some adjustments if you need. If you're just looking for any kind of diet to start with, and the carnivore diet doesn't speak to you, then try to find a different diet that does. Something that looks like it encourages more foods that you actually like. It just gives them a little more freedom of food choice and makes it a little bit easier to eat your meals throughout the day if you don't feel like you have to, cook so much meat and attend to so much meat. But I do appreciate the person who viewed/listened to the podcast on our YouTube page. I appreciate people commenting. Certain comments, if somebody's just rude, I'm not going to necessarily appreciate that because I can't learn from that and no one's learning from that. But in this one, I thought it was neat because they gave a lot of really good points that we could discuss. And they gave an encouragement at the end, which I thought was great. So I'm very happy for this person that they're feeling good. I'm glad they found a diet that works for them. Awesome, kick ass, keep doing it. And like they said, and I definitely agree, is if anybody's interested in the carnivore diet, go ahead and give it a try and just see how it does for you. So I'm only one person. I only have one opinion. You can definitely listen to a lot of other experts and people who, know this stuff in and out and kind of decide for yourself. Cool. I thought that was fun. I just wanted to respond, but I wanted to do it in a way in which it reached more people. So if you have any follow-up questions, if you need anything, just shoot me an email at brutalirongym@gmail.com. If you like our podcast, please share the podcast. If you like the podcast, you can consider donating to help support some of the cost, which you can do on our website. And then if you like the information we share in our podcast, you can always find more from us on our social media channels. You can find us and please follow us on Instagram and YouTube under the name Brutal Iron Gym. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.